For the latest in strategic affairs, subscribe to our YouTube channel. Click the bell icon for updates.
Hello and welcome. Good evening. You are on StratNews Global. I'm Nitin Gokhale. And as expected, the tension in the Taiwan Straits between China and Taiwan, and of course the wider region, is hogging the limelight and the headlines in the past few days. So today's discussion on our evening program, The Gist, is going to be centered around that. As I said, you're on StratNews Global and also on the evening program, The Gist. And my guest today is someone who has watched the Indo-Pacific and with a special focus on China and also peripherally, of course, Taiwan. Captain James Fanell, former Director of Intelligence and Information Operations of the US Pacific Fleet, who retired from the US Navy in 2015 after a 30-year career and is now a fellow at the Geneva Centre for Security Policy in Switzerland. In fact, he's joining us from Switzerland. And welcome to this program, Captain Fanell.
Well, good evening, Nitin, and thank you for the invitation.
It's our pleasure. And someone like you who is specialized in all this would be able to give us some insights. So first up, what do you make of the Chinese move of, consistent or let's say regular intrusion in the Taiwanese airspace, or at least the ADIZ? In the past 3 or 4 days, and what does it imply? What do the Chinese want to achieve?
Well, they have been making penetrations, the PRC's air forces, naval and air forces, for about 2.5 years. But in the last weekend, as you mentioned, they dramatically ramped up the number of aircraft that penetrated the Taiwan's Southern Air Defense Identification Zone and flew 149 combat aircraft into that region. And it's clearly an escalation in China's tactics to bring Taiwan under their control. And so the Chinese Communist Party's strategic end state is to make Taiwan be part of the People's Republic of China. The Chinese Communist Party says that we want to reunify Taiwan into China. Those of us that know that Taiwan was never part of the People's Republic of China know that there is no reunification, that this would be a unilateral unification effort by China. And they've tried to do it with non-kinetic pressure, diplomatic pressure, economic pressure, information warfare. But they are now starting to really emphasize the military capabilities of the PLA.
In fact, that's the very valid point, because non-kinetic doesn't seem to have worked all these years. But I'm curious about the timing. One knows the founding, the day PRC was founded is 1st October in 1949. And perhaps they wanted to show their military might by sending so many aircraft together into the Taiwanese airspace. But the other timing could be that next year in 2022, Xi Jinping has to get sort of a resumption of his term, third term. Could that be one of the driving forces behind this the move that the PRC has done?
Yeah, there is a lot of discussion about exactly why the PRC is making these moves right now. I think most likely it's a combination of many events. I think the National Day, 1 October for the PRC is one of the rationales. I think it's also, as you said, that Xi has to build up his credibility or his power base inside the Chinese Communist Party because of concerns about other factions. And so this is a demonstration of his control over the PLA. There's also the Beijing Olympics that come up in the winter here. It's another signal of his power. And then there's also concerns about the weakness of the United States right now under the Biden administration in terms of what happened in Afghanistan and the departure, and there's now reports even that maybe Chinese aircraft have landed in Bagram Air Base. That has not been confirmed to me, but I've seen some reports on that. And so there's a confluence of events that's causing the Chinese Communist Party to calculate that this is the right time to do these things and to essentially threaten Taiwan into obedience.
Indeed. In fact, in the event that the escalation just keeps going up the ladder, what is going to be the response of the allies that Taiwan has, especially the United States or even Japan? Do you foresee this being taken to a next level by the Chinese? And what should be the response? Should be the response. I'll come to whether Biden administration has the stomach for it or not. But should there be a response, because the US is obligated to defend Taiwan, right?
Yes, we have our Taiwan Relations Act that says that it's not a mutual defense treaty. It's an act that said that we would help Taiwan remain not independent in essence, but to be no physical violence that would change the status of the Taiwan Strait. One country, two systems, and we've abided by that agreements with the People's Republic of China for 40 years. But China has clearly violated those conditions of the three communiques. And now I think Americans are starting to ask themselves, why should we continue to play along with a system or an agreement that China is violating? So I think very much so the United States needs to join Japan and Australia, who've already come out with some very strong statements in support of Taiwan for the last month or two. In fact, Australia, even over the course of this last week, with this increased flight activity, Australia has said that they would be there to help Taiwan and that do not approve of what China's doing. The United States is not only duty bound through the Taiwan Relations Act to do something, it's also morally correct thing to do, because China's threatening 23 million people that live free in a democracy. And if we let that democracy be extinguished, who will be the next democracy to be attacked as China expands their totalitarian controls?
Oh, indeed. In fact, as we can see over the past couple of years, there was the aggression against India on the land border. There was the South China Sea pushing the envelope consistently and not getting a pushback from the smaller countries in that region. But Taiwan or aggression against Taiwan and escalation is quite something else, right? In the sense that then the US will come into play kinetically, like the Australians have also said. So, which is the tipping point as far as the Taiwan relations with the US is concerned? I mean, what would be the trigger for the United States to intervene militarily, in your assessment?
I think the PRC's press organ, the Global Times, has 3 times over the last month and a half issued statements that said if the situation continues where Taiwan seeks independence to break away, and that the United States would use Taiwan as a chip in a bargaining table in a card game, if you will, that China would then use its air forces to fly over the island of Taiwan. They've said that on August 12th and twice on September 12th. And in between, they've made very clear and unambiguous threatening statements, the Global Times has, which is really kind of an unofficial mouthpiece for the Chinese Communist Party. They've said that they will launch an invasion to take Taiwan. And even in the last 24 hours, Taiwan's defense minister says that he believes that the situation is the worst between China and Taiwan in 40 years, and that he believes that by 2025, China will have the capability to launch an invasion, an amphibious invasion of Taiwan. I happen to believe that they have that capability today. And so I think things are very, very dangerous. And if China were to fly their aircraft over the island of Taiwan, I think the risk there of a conflict, because Taiwan would have to defend its airspace either with a fighter shooting down, a Taiwanese Air Force fighter shooting down a Chinese fighter, or using a surface-to-air missile. And that would cause a conflict to start. And I think the United States would have to insert itself and to try to deter the People's Republic of China from taking such an act. Unfortunately, that deterrence has not worked. Right now, there are essentially 4 big deck carriers operating in the Philippine Sea. the USS Ronald Reagan, the USS Carl Vinson, the United Kingdom's Queen Elizabeth II aircraft carrier strike group, and also the Japanese carrier, amphibious carrier, helicopter carrier called the Issei. All four of those are operating. And so that you would think that would be a big deterrent effect. Some people have said that's been a provocation, but it should be a deterrent effect. So I think what's happening is the administration of the United States hasn't really come out and had very strong statements. They've had a statement from the State Department spokesman, Mr. Price. The White House spokesperson, Psaki, has said something, but there hasn't been a clear and unambiguous statement from the president or the Secretary of Defense or the Secretary of State that says, if you cross this line, you will pay for it. And so I'm really worried about that. And I think that this administration's in a bit of a bad position because many of these people were in the Obama administration. And Obama got criticized for his red lines in Syria, where he declared a red line and then he never backed it up. And so I think this administration's now afraid of maybe making a bold statement and not backing it up, which leads China to be further aggressive.
It looks like that because what we saw in Afghanistan actually is an indication that this administration may have lost the stomach for a fight or taking bold or hard decisions. And that makes allies wonder. While India is not a United States ally in any sense, it is a partner, certainly in the Indo-Pacific. And you watch Indo-Pacific quite deeply and quite regularly. What would be the effect of a kind of a very mild action or a no action from the United States on its partners and allies and friends in the Indo-Pacific? Then the notion that the US is a declining power in the Indo-Pacific would just get strengthened. Would you think so?
Yeah, that's the great concern right now, is that the perception is that the United States is declining, which fits the Chinese Communist Party's propaganda narrative that they've been pushing for since Xi's come to power. But they're very much pushing it hard, especially in the aftermath of the Bagram and Kabul and Afghanistan departure. So I think we have seen throughout history, you can go back to the Korean War, you can go back to the Iraq war with Kuwait and Desert Storm. When the United States gives ambiguous signals, it tends to cause nations like the PRC or North Korea or Saddam Hussein in Iraq to take advantage of that and to use it as they believe in their minds that they can launch an invasion. And so the United States should know from history that what works is the Reagan policy of peace through strength. Trump followed similar policy, where you made sure that your adversaries were no ambiguity, that if you take action and do something like this, you will pay dearly for it. And I do not subscribe to the idea that the United States is a declining power. We're going through some serious internal debates right now, and the left wing is pushed very far forward, but there are still many, many people that support democracy and freedom and liberty. And they stand with Taiwan, they stand with Japan, they stand with Australia, and they clearly stand with the largest democracy in Asia, which is India. And so we have shared common values, and we need to be able to stand together. And I would just ask my friends in India, don't give up on America.
No, certainly not. In fact, I also subscribe to your viewpoint that it's not a declining power, it's a reluctant power right now, at least in Indo-Pacific. If you have to really describe it, in my view, US is a reluctant power right now, but it is militarily still very strong, and we still don't know how the PRC will fare in a hot war. But I think what needs to be done from the White House, at least, is very clear, unambiguous, and very hard statement about what the PRC is doing. A clear message to Xi Jinping that he cannot get away with what he is doing. Probably that will save us from a conflict. But if that does not happen, then I think we are in for a very unstable kind of a period in recent history. And going forward, my final question to you, Captain James Fanell, is what would be the effect on the politics or geopolitics of Southeast Asia if this happens, because the ASEAN countries are actually caught between this great power struggle, what now somebody wants to describe it as strategic competition. What would be their kind of a stand, and what would be their choices?
Yes, the ASEAN nations of the South China Sea are in a very difficult position because they've traditionally relied upon the United States as the security benefactor to the region. And we've done that since the end of World War II, just basically sailing our ships around and not bothering anybody, but making sure that the area stayed calm. But then over the course of the last 40 years, as China opened up their economy, China became the biggest economic trading partner with many of these nations, almost all of them. So therefore, these nations are in a situation where they have traditionally wanted to rely upon the United States for physical protection, but to continue to trade with China for economic benefit. If the United States were to back off and step away, these small nations would find themselves at the mercy of China's military capabilities. In a sense, that's what's happened since 2012, when China took Scarborough Shoal from the Republic of the Philippines from April to June of 2012, and then the subsequent 3 years of building the 7 artificial islands in the Spratlys. And now, basically, China's Navy and military operates more often in the South China Sea than any other Navy or military. And so, in essence, they've kind of already changed the military balance of power in the South China Sea. And these nations are very, very afraid of having to make a decision. And they say that we don't want to make a decision. The United States should honor that statement, but we should reinforce to them that they don't have to make a decision as long as they continue to support the existing international order, which benefits small countries from large predators like the People's Republic of China. The United Nations Convention Law of the Sea, which is written mostly by American sea lawyers, provides protection to smaller nations from bigger nations that allows every nation that's a coastal state to sail in international waters, freedom of navigation, and free access to markets. China won't enforce that if they become the dominant military power in the Western Pacific.
In a way, the contest is between the Chinese system, or the system that China wants to impose, opaque, not rules-based, and the democratic convention or the democratic rules-based order that countries like India, United States, Japan, and Australia, and many other smaller countries want to continue with. This seems to be a much larger framework to the conflict, or the probably impending conflict between Taiwan and China, and then of course everybody gets drawn in. I did say one final question, but I think I have one more additional question to you. India has demonstrated its resolve and its ability to stand up to China twice in the last 4 years. Once at Doklam on the tri-junction with Bhutan, and now in the Ladakh, although it's ongoing, but at least it has forced China to go back from some of the positions that it had tried to occupy forcibly. What would be India's role in Indo-Pacific in your assessment?
I think India is the key to peace and stability in the Indo-Pacific, in terms of you are there. Your nation and your country are bordered on China, and you're a great nation. You have a population that's bigger than China's. Your economy will be bigger than China's because you're a free market. And so China has to consider India, and they cannot assume that they can just take control of everybody without considering the impact that China or India will have on China. And I think that's where India stands at the center of history, to be able to tell the rest of the world that you stand for freedom and liberty, and that you're not going to be engaged in alliances that'll put your nation at risk. I think that's very wise, but you're also not going to shy away from standing up for truth and what's right. And that's where I think when you stand up and lead, other nations will follow. And with the United States standing with you as a partner, along with nations like Japan and Australia, and we can beat back the forces from the PRC, not with violence, but we can beat them back through the force of our ideas and our liberty that people really want.
Absolutely, it's the contest of ideas. Very well put, Captain Fanell. Thank you for your time and your insights. We are honored that you came at a short notice on this program, but we'll continue to depend on you whenever we require insights and expertise on the region and especially on the PRC. Thanks very much for your time.
Thank you very much. Have a good evening.
Good evening. So, viewers, don't go away. Do keep sending your feedback and your comments, and of course, you know where to reach us on our social media handles. And of course, keep sending the feedback and comments so that we can get more and more programs that interest you, and we can keep informing you. For the moment, it's goodbye.